Hi guys, just taking a couple of minutes out of the day to reach out to you and hopefully encourage you a little bit. And I've got a story that I came across that I think that you might really get something from today, and so I wanted to share it with you. This is a story written by a pastor by the name of John Ortberg, and it's not fiction, it's true. And I think that it speaks to what's going on today, and so let me share it with you. It's called Mabel's Story. The state-run convalescent hospital is not a pleasant place. It is large, understaffed, and overfilled with senile and helpless and lonely people who are waiting to die. On the brightest of days, it seems dark inside, and it smells of sickness and stale urine. I went there once or twice a week for 4 years, but never wanted to go there, and I always left with a sense of relief. It's not the kind of place one gets used to. On this particular day, I was walking in a hallway that I had not visited before, looking in vain for a few who were alive enough to receive a flower and a few words of encouragement. This hallway seemed to contain some of the worst cases, strapped onto carts or into wheelchairs and looking completely helpless. As I neared the end of this hallway, I saw an old woman strapped in a wheelchair. Her face was an absolute horror. The empty stare and white pupils of her eyes told me that she was blind. The large hearing aid over one ear told me that she was almost deaf. One side of her face was being eaten by cancer. There was a discolored and running sore covering part of one cheek, and it had pushed her nose to one side, dropped one eye, and distorted her jaw so that what should have been in the corner of her mouth was now the bottom of her mouth. As a consequence, she drooled constantly. I was told later that when new nurses arrived, the supervisor would send them to feed this woman, thinking that if they could stand the sight of her, they could stand anything in the building. I also learned later that this woman was 89 years old and that she had been here, bedridden, blind, nearly deaf and alone for 25 years. This was Mabel. I don't know why I spoke to her. She looked less likely to respond than most of the people I saw in the hallway. But I put a flower in her hand and I said, "Here's a flower for you. Happy Mother's Day." She held the flower up to her face and tried to smell it, and then she spoke. And much to my surprise, her words, although somewhat garbled because of her deformity, were obviously produced by a clear mind. She said, "Thank you, it's lovely, but can I give it to someone else? I can't see it, you know. I'm blind." I said, "Of course," and pushed her chair back down the hallway to a place where I thought we could find some alert patients. I found one, and I stopped the chair. Mabel held out the flower and said, "Here, this is from Jesus." That was when it began to dawn on me that this was not an ordinary human being. Later I wheeled her back to her room and learned more about her history. She had grown up on a small farm that she managed with only her mother until her mother had died, and she ran the farm alone until 1950, when her blindness and sickness sent her into the convalescent hospital. For 25 years she got weaker and sicker, with constant headaches, backaches, and stomach aches, and then the cancer came too. Her 3 roommates were all human vegetables, who screamed occasionally but never talked. They often soiled their bedclothes, and because the hospital was understaffed, especially on Sundays when I usually visited, the stench was often overpowering. Mabel and I became friends over the next few weeks, and I went to see her once or twice for the next 3 years. Once or twice a week for the next 3 years. Her first words to me were usually an offer of hard candy from her tissue box near her bed. Some days I would read to her from the Bible, and often when I would pause, she would continue reciting the passage from memory, word for word. On other days I would take a book of hymns and sing with her, and she would know all the words to all the old songs. For Mabel, these were not merely exercises in memory. She would often stop in mid-hymn and make a brief comment about lyrics she considered to be particularly relevant to her own situation. I never heard her speak of loneliness or pain, except in the stress that she placed on certain lines in certain hymns. It was not many weeks before I turned from a sense that I was being helped and helpful to a sense of wonder. And I would go to her with a pen and paper and write down things that she would say. During one hectic week of final exams, I was frustrated because my mind seemed to be pulled in 10 different directions at once with all of the things that I had to think about. The question occurred to me, what does Mabel have to think about? Hour after hour, day after day, week after week, not even able to know if it's day or night. So I went to her and I asked, Mabel, what do you think about when you lay here? And she said, I think about my Jesus. I sat there and I thought for a moment about the difficulty for me of thinking about Jesus for even 5 minutes. And I asked, what do you think about Jesus? She replied slowly and deliberately as I wrote. I think about how good he's been to me, she said. He's been awfully good to me in my life, you know. I'm one of those kind who's mostly satisfied. Lots of folks wouldn't care for much for what I think. Lots of folks would think I'm kind of old-fashioned. But I don't care. I'd rather have Jesus. He's all the world to me. And then Mabel began to sing an old hymn. Jesus is all the world to me. My life, my joy, my all. He is my strength from day to day. Without him, I would fall. When I am sad, to him I go. No one other can cheer me so. When I am sad, he makes me glad. He's my friend. This isn't fiction, this is true. And incredible as it may seem, a human being really lived like this. I know, because John Ortberg wrote that he knew her. How could she do it? Seconds ticked, minutes crawled, and so did days and weeks and months and years of pain without human company and without an explanation of why it was all happening. And she lay there and sang hymns. How could she do it? The answer, I think, is that Mabel had something that you and I don't have much of. She had power. Lying there in bed, unable to move, unable to see, unable to hear, unable to talk to anyone, she had incredible power. You and I can have that power if we're only to die to ourselves and allow the Holy Spirit to fill us to overflowing. And today, as we complain and go on and on about the difficulties we're struggling through over these last few weeks, shouldn't we be spending this time realizing that it really is all about Jesus? And that when we lose things like our jobs that we would go to every day, when we no longer have contact, face-to-face contact with too many other people at all, and when we find ourselves confined in a space that we used to want to come home to, we still have Jesus. And shouldn't we take this time of less distraction and pay more attention to him? Because he really is all that we need. No matter what's going on in our lives, maybe we should take a page from Mabel's story and understand that Jesus is our friend. I love you guys. Take care. God bless you.